My dear friends, on this presentation we have a prologue because it's a slightly different format than normal. I came across two old short documentaries from the 90s. They are German productions and I thought they are so interesting I wanted to share them with you. There is no English translation of this and there is no subtitles, so I carefully translated all myself for your pleasure, for your entertaining viewing. It was with the help of my dearest Odette. She helped me with this because of the Viennese accent, for one, which I had a problem with on the first documentary. Also the colloquialisms of the Viennese and the German accents. You know, there's all different types of ways of saying things in these countries, which can vary from just a few hundred kilometers. And so here we speak in Switzerland, Swiss German, but we use a lot of French terms as well. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. It was quite difficult because some of them were mumbling, there was background noise. It was horrendous and the audio quality was not good either. I'm pretty sure we've done a great job. There might be a few things we missed out, but very few. For instance, the Viennese say Klose for toilet, where in German here, in the Swiss German, we say WC or Toilette. So just little things like that I wouldn't have got without Odette. But the second one is a German one and set in Germany. And so the people they're interviewing are Germans. That was a lot easier. Apart from this chap, I'll intersperse the prologue with this chap so you can get an idea of the difficulties I had. And also in the Viennese, they interviewed one of the neighbors, had problem understanding her.
Wir hatten zu dieser Zeit gerade eine Sanierung des Hauses. Also es wurden die Klosett, die Gänsen, erneuert. Ja? Und da waren alle Klosett offen und dort sowieso gestunken in dem Haus.
Dann hat es geheißen, er ist in der Tschechoslowakei, weil sie dort Verwandte haben. Also, dass er da oben liegt, das haben wir wirklich nicht gewusst.
Wie kommt es, dass Sie gar nichts gemerkt haben? Haben Sie sie nicht vermisst?
Ich hab's gemerkt. Ich habe auch Alarm gemacht. Nur da hat man sich nicht drum gekümmert.
Wo haben Sie Alarm gemacht?
Beim Hausmeister.
Und was hat er gesagt?
Wir werden uns drum kümmern. Ich sag, wir vermissen die Frau und das riecht jetzt hier so schon allmählich.
But we got there in the end, and I think you'll find it very interesting, and I'm going to chat about it afterwards with you, why I decided to do this. Basically it has a lot to do with the society we're heading into, but I'll get to that at the end. Okay, are you ready, my friends? Here we go. It is said that the Viennese have an erotic relationship with death. The idyllic place of worship for this quiet passion is the central cemetery. For a very long time it's been the last meeting point on the road to the final destination. But lately, quite a few people who have died have been late in finding their final resting place. The forgotten dead of Vienna, who for years no one has found. They lay in their apartments while neighbours and acquaintances, post office workers and police officers were ignorant that they were missing. First, bailiffs and clearers found the bodies by chance, 8 in the last few months alone. The Vienna city mummies provides an opportunity for the living to imagine this happening to themselves. The question of responsibility is always linked to the question of how does this happen? That is, all those people who have been missing for years after their death is an alarming sign. And this shows that in this city, like in every other city, there are numerous people who are not missed by others when they are in trouble. Kurt Kawiski, tram worker, resident at Mollierstrasse 58, Otterking district, is in serious trouble. His bank balance was exhausted, and no rent had been paid for years. After Kawiski did not respond to reminders, the Vienna Municipal Utilities terminated his company apartment. When the bailiff gained access to Kawiski's apartment on April the 20th, with the help of a locksmith, they find the insolvent tenant in bed. The tenant could no longer be roused. Kawiski had been insolvent for a long time. He lay dead in his apartment for 4 years. changing from human to mummy, and the neighbors didn't notice the lonely dying man or smell anything. At that time they were renovating the house, so they wanted to replace the toilets. So all the toilets were open, and it smelled in the house anyway. Then it was said that he must have relatives in Czechoslovakia, that he was probably staying there, that he was lying upstairs. We really didn't know. It's very sad that he's been missing for 4 years in a big city. But nothing can be done. At his workplace, the absence of Kawiski was noticed early on. The employer, the Vienna Public Transport Company, behaved in accordance with regulations. So we have to point out that, first of all, if someone is absent, their payments will be stopped immediately. Then he will no longer receive any earnings on his checking account. And secondly, of course, the company had already tried everything to find him, which was of course difficult. When looking for colleague Kawiski, the transport company was concerned about effectiveness. In a notice in the official gazette of the city of Vienna, he was asked to return to work immediately. But Kurt Kawiski doesn't respond. The official procedure will be followed and disciplinary action will be taken. If he does not comply with this request within 6 months, he is considered to have lost his employment. This means that the employment relationship for the employer in the municipal utility transport company is then dissolved. And so what had to happen came about. 6 months after his death, Kurt Kawiski also became unemployed. At Kuhnplatz 4, in a house in the middle of the city, 2 tenants remained undisturbed for a long time. They were still paying their rent even after their death. This was debited from the account of Sister Emma and Valerie Mitkiska. Even after several years, there were still sufficient funds. It wasn't until December 1992 that the police decided to take a look into the apartment. Emma Mitkiska died in 1985. Her sister, Valerie, who was 85 years old, wrapped her in a carpet. Cared for in such a way, Emma, even after her death, provides companionship to her only remaining relative. A year after her sister, Valerie Mitkiska also dies. The dead women remain undiscovered in the apartment for 6 years. Forgotten, but not decayed. An architectural peculiarity. They, like other Viennese corpses, are preserved in a comparatively good condition. The Viennese apartments are therefore very suitable for city mummification. The mummies discovered are mostly found in middle-class apartments. Those built around the turn of the century and the Wilhelminian era. They are not so tightly sealed from those eras. The windows and doors don't have such strong insulation. There is always a movement of air and a circulation to the outside world. That's why the neighbors cannot easily detect the unpleasant odor, because the apartment ventilates itself to a certain extent. The houses of the founding era are like morgues of the present. The favorable climatic conditions in the 3rd district also extend the time a corpse is preserved considerably, and this even though various officials who came into the apartment almost stepped on their toes. Elfriede Köppel hid her dead son in his bed for 4 years. When she died in December 92, and the police searched the apartment, the body still lay undiscovered. So he was effectively hidden from sight. My view also in the observation of the mother and son's circumstances is that there were no clues to be found, and so no one from the officials at the time who looked at the mother could therefore be aware that a human was lying dead. The mother embalmed the body in 1989, wrapped in binding and cloth and hidden under a duvet. It wasn't until 4 months after the mother was taken away that the clearers discovered the son's body. Mentally disabled since childhood, Peter Sluka-Körpel had spent his entire life with his mother. They only left the apartment together. Contact with the neighbors was rare. After the son's death, the mother completely neglected herself. She was considered strange and, the neighbors said, only lived for art. The last few weeks before her death, she had begged for food in the building. Only then did the neighbors start to think about her son's whereabouts and informed the authorities several times. We then pointed out again that her son was missing. We had been afraid for a long time that he had died, and at times she could barely carry such huge bags of rubbish that she actually dragged them backwards and threw them in the container. We were afraid that she might be throwing him away. To this day, mother and son are separated. While Peter Sluka-Körpel is still being examined by forensic medicine, Elfriede Körpel lies in the central cemetery, waiting for a reunion in the Viennese style. The report comes on August the 12th, shortly after 12 noon. Emergency, door closed. Police call the fire department to a high-rise building at Striepenweg 40 in the Hamburg suburb of Neuwiedental. Everything looks like a routine operation, but what the officers discovered a little later behind the door of the apartment number 7 on the 16th floor were the consequences of a decades-long state of human emergency. The already decomposed body of the tenant, Marianne Woodroffer, was only found after they had cleared a path through the completely neglected apartment. On not quite 40 square meters, the woman had led a bizarre double life for decades. Between rubbish, old paper and clothes that had never been worn before, firefighters now discovered what she was trying to hide. We took our door opening tools with us. I then sniffed the door, and once you've had the smell of a corpse in your nose, then you don't forget it, and you know roughly what to expect when you open a door like that. We then opened the door with a C-fix, i.e. we pulled the cylinder out. I then went into the building with a breathing apparatus and found the woman there lifeless. She was already dead for 9 months and was basically just skin and bones. The woman died sometime in the winter of the previous year, and an autopsy was no longer possible. Official cause of death: alcohol abuse. For almost a year, the body lay in the bedroom of the small apartment number 7, apparently unnoticed by most of the neighbors. Only when the smell of decomposition became very apparent did it rouse interest. How come you didn't even notice? Didn't you miss her? I reported it. We did it for a long time, but no one cared about it. Then who did you say that to? To the caretaker. And what did he say? He said, we'll take care of it. I said, the woman is missing and it's starting to smell here. Nobody knows how Marianne Woodroffer's life ended. Was it a quick death or was it a slow death? Did she finally starve or die of thirst after days or weeks? One thing is certain, no one could have imagined the compulsive chaos on the 16th floor, because at least once a week, the woman went to a nearby boutique to buy a new item of clothing. The owner finally called the police after her best customer stayed away for months. A very likable, extremely nice middle-class woman, a well-groomed woman, intelligent woman. A customer over the years. We have had many conversations with each other. She is also known here in the area, a business person actually. Marianne Woodroffer was also known to have a particularly well-groomed appearance at her workplace, at the General Local Health Insurance Company. The clerk compensated for the systematic devastation of her apartment when she retired a year and a half previously, apparently with a pathological obsession with cleanliness, outside of her own 4 walls. This was her last place of work, the last 2 years. When she got a new desk, she first took out everything that was in it then got a bowl and a rag and dishwashing liquid, and then she cleaned it thoroughly. But not exactly like I would do, but really neat, really perfect. With the computer, before starting the keyboard, she actually took the keys out and cleaned each one individually. The keyboard looked like new afterwards. She went to the hairdresser once a week, looked after herself and dressed really chic, and never let herself go. Marianne Woodroffer was born on February the 29th, 1932, in Hamburg, Wilhelmsburg. She was only 3 years old when her parents divorced. At the start of the war, she was just 7. The mother's new husband adopts the girl. Marianne's parents' home is considered middle class, but the relationship with her stepfather is strained from the start. Even after her mother's death, he forbids any contact with her biological father and her 2 half-sisters, and Marianne adheres to the ban. Only decades later will she break it. Her father was a dictator. She probably lived well, in good financial circumstances, but there is nothing in between. It was just her stepfather. There was no birthday parties. She wasn't allowed to bring a friend home. That's what she told us. He actually cut her off from any contact with others. She was allowed to go to school, but I don't think she was even allowed to go on a trip. So she was actually prohibited from having any contact with the outside world. Marianne displays no signs of her home environment. She is considered a fun-loving young woman. Although she is already earning money as an employee, she still lives at home with her unloved stepfather. She was already in her mid-30s when the final break occurred. Her father got together with her school friend, and she couldn't get over that. Then she got an apartment, moved out, and broke off contact. In 1968, she moved into the high-rise building on Striepenweg, just a few minutes away from her parents' house, her very first apartment. She raves to friends and acquaintances about the magnificent view on the 16th floor, but probably no one else than her has ever entered apartment 7. Soon after she moved in, the woman must have started collecting items that others threw out as trash. After breaking away from her stepfather, she doesn't want to part with anything anymore. The mountains of garbage are slowly growing meters high. And Marianne Woodroffer makes herself unreachable. She doesn't open the door to anyone. Mail isn't answered. And she doesn't even allow a telephone line to be connected. Nobody should see what it looks like here. Did you ever notice that she had a visitor? Not at all. What did she do? I don't know. Have you ever heard the television? Nothing at all. Nothing at all. I've only met her a few times, or we met while shopping, or we would go up together in the elevator. You hear when someone has a visitor, but never with her. I can say that door never opened. There were 2 serious relationships with men in Marianne Woodroffer's life. She tells an acquaintance that her fiancé from their childhood years died in an accident. It wasn't until the end of the 1970s that the woman fell in love again. But she didn't let her boyfriend into the apartment either, and he ended up renting a room. At the time we got in touch, she had a boyfriend who lived in Hanover. She often went there. She also had an apartment there. I got a telephone number for the apartment. I spoke to her twice, but it was kept secret. No one else should have it. I even kept the phone number always hidden from my family. But soon they will no longer be able to reach her at this number. They see each other again during a hospital visit. Then Marianne Woodroffer breaks off contact with her half-sisters again. The colleagues at AKO still have no idea of the complete chaos in the life of this single woman. But working for the health insurance company is Marianne Woodroffer's last stop on the way to total isolation. But then she is pressured to retire early. She initially refuses, but finally agrees to retire at the end of 1995. She talked about this to us again and again, and she told several people here that it cost her a lot of strength. She also cried sometimes. She really fought for this job, and she wanted to continue working. At the time, we really thought she meant in a financial sense. And now looking back, we have to say it was simply the fight for this togetherness with people. This work that made her feel valuable. It was needed. And she had a goal, and her day was fulfilled. When Marianne Woodroffer retires at the age of 63, her apartment on the 16th floor is probably the last bit of space growing over her. The garbage spreads waist-high throughout the apartment. Former colleagues want to visit her, and they see a light behind her window, but Marianne Woodroffer doesn't open the door. The last year of her life has begun. For Christmas, her colleague sent her, who was now lovingly called Woody by everyone, a small present and a few lines. "The dearest Woody of all," it reads, and she gets something for Christmas. She deserves it. They never get an answer. Marianne Woodroffer had probably drowned herself in alcohol because of her loneliness. When her apartment was cleared, they found, among other things, 1,200 empty wine and beer bottles, 500 pairs of used and unused tights, 400 dresses and skirts, some of them new, an estimated 10,000 used paper handkerchiefs, 350 bottles of perfume, some of which were still full, and around 3,000 old newspapers.
Für mich ist es unvorstellbar, dass ein Mensch so viel Tempo und Küchenrolle und was alles, das ist ja alles durcheinander. Ne?
Und für wie alt halten Sie den ganzen?
This one I couldn't translate exactly because it was basically unintelligible. He's wearing a mask, the audio is bad and he's making a hell of a noise, but he's basically telling the reporter what he found in the apartment, i.e. old newspapers, lots of empty bottles of alcohol, used tissues, and basically just absolute rubbish. So that's about it. Nothing really important.
Sie sehen ja, was da noch an Masse liegt und unter jedem Berg sind wieder Dosen.
And while the jumbled traces of her 64-year-old life were still being thrown away, Marianne Woodroffer would be buried in the Heidel Friedhof in Hamburg, Neuwiedental. Her death had come long before actual death. Only a few neighbours showed up at the funeral service, who she didn't know. 2 saleswomen and a pastor who didn't even know her name. May God draw near to us all, as God pleases us to be masters of life and death. Our sister, Marianne Woodroffer, at the age of 64, present for eternity. Let us give up her body to perish what is perishable. Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. After covering or translating these 2 short documentaries, I decided to go and have a look online with the keyword mummified body found in home. And I was actually surprised at just how many results I found. unbelievable. And a lot of them were hoarder homes. Not surprisingly, but it was the amount of time that some of these bodies lay undiscovered that shocked me. It really does. And this is why I want to talk about what leads to people becoming hoarders and what leads to bodies lying for sometimes years without intervention from neighbors or social services. Really quite sad state of affairs. And I can see in the future there will be more and more of these cases because society is moving in a direction where nobody wants to be involved, nobody wants to intrude upon other people's lives for fear that they would be classed as being nosy. In the old days, there wasn't really that attitude, especially where my parents lived in the north of England. People left their doors open, they didn't lock it. There was hardly any crime back then anyway, and neighbours went and checked on each other. They called in for a cup of tea, or they may be asked to borrow, some tea bags or tea leaves, whereas nowadays that doesn't really happen as much. People are more and more being involved in their own little universe and not looking outside towards others. You can see a lot of the young people walking around with their mobile phones in their hand. They just stare at it. Even when they're walking along the street, I couldn't even do that. Earphones in their ears, they're just really blocked off from the rest of the world. What baffles me, you'll see with some of these cases, is that sometimes the weeds will be so high in the garden. There's a car in the driveway with a tree growing through it, and no one says anything. And if they do, as we see with the German neighbor of that lady hoarder in the last documentary we covered there, he did contact the authorities several times and was basically told, go and speak to the caretaker. Caretaker didn't do anything. They're not interested. As long as the bills are being paid, it's when the bills don't get paid anymore, that's when they come snooping around. But as long as you're paid up, as far as they're concerned, you can just rot. So I was really quite shocked to see how many cases there actually are. Wow. Of course, not all of them are classic mummified body lying in a house for years. Some of them are funeral homes where there's been a deliberate criminal action to get money from people and just not do what they were paid to do. But a lot of them are actually, bodies that have lain around for a long, long time, and neighbours are oblivious. I remember about 20 years ago, it must have been, I was in Australia, it was more than 20 years ago, reading of a case in England where this house was overgrown. The letters couldn't fit in the letterbox anymore. They were strewn around. The house was obviously showing signs of neglect. And it wasn't until a burglar broke into the house. He said downstairs was, it looks like it had been set up for a meal. The meal had disintegrated. He went upstairs and got the shock of his life. There was a skeleton in bed. He phoned the police anonymously. They came around, and this lady had been lying dead for years in her own house. She was known to be a recluse, kept to herself, and unfortunately a lot of these cases are so, where the person doesn't want interaction with the neighbours or the community, and so people accept that and don't bother with them. So it's not always the fault of the community or the authorities. But I do think if we see houses like that, but then again nowadays if you see a house lying vacant for a long time, it could be a foreign investor who's just bought the place and they're not doing anything with it. It's very hard to tell. But if you knew that somebody was living there, I think it is up to the community to start taking steps to find out why that person hasn't been seen in a long time. Well, a couple of cases I sort of highlighted. And, this wasn't just the only site. This is a different browser. Other cases here of mummified bodies. It's just loading up. This one here, we'll have a look at that case in a minute. Look, there's his car from the 90s. He had been a recluse for 30 years after a relationship breakdown. And we'll have a look at that story in a minute. I'm going to have to turn this off because the format of the screen will be changed once I go to these individual articles. See you in a second. So let's have a quick look through some of the individual cases. This one is from my home country of Australia, and it's in my home state of Sydney. This guy here, right, had been left $1 million back in the 80s and a property to live in. So I don't believe he ever worked. He became a recluse. Didn't bother anybody. But apparently somebody broke into his home, and this guy had about 13 guns. So he wasn't someone, that the burglar would expect to have weapons. He was a hoarder, a recluse, but he got a shock when he broke in and got shot dead. So what he did was, this guy, he kept the body of the burglar. He didn't want to go to prison. He just kept it and put heaps of air fresheners in. More than 70 bottles of air fresheners were found around Snellman's mummified corpse. Snellman was the criminal who broke in a conscious effort to mask the smell. Roberts rarely left his Greenwich home, which he inherited at a young age, along with $1 million. $1 million back then was a lot of money. So he was also a hoarder, another hoarder. And anyway, so the corpse was found in 2 bits. Extreme hoarder, it says here. And so after his death, that is when they started going through the property and sorting it out and cleaning it out. And then they found this body of this criminal who had been missing all this time. He had just been released from prison and decided to break into someone's property. Well done. And he was on amphetamines, including meth. This was the burglar. Impact marks from the bullets were found on the wall and floor. So the criminal must have got the shock of his life. The financially secure man's Greendale Street home was known as the creepy house on the corner by neighbours, who called him strange and uncommunicative. Regardless of the season, Roberts always wore a large brown coat on his daily walks to the supermarket or pharmacy, probably carrying a gun. I think he might have been a bit of a paranoid character. His fence was lined with barbed wire, and he nailed his windows shut. Yeah, he was a paranoid fella. Living for so long on your own, you probably would get that way. But anyway, he ended up leaving his house and $600 and cash to his uncle and auntie, John and Norma, along with several charities. Well, good on him. That's $600,000 in cash, by the way. At the non-criminal inquest for Roberts and Snellman, a niece of the homicide victim reportedly remembered her uncle as a kind man. So this is the guy that supposedly broke in. He was a very loving man, would do anything for anyone. He didn't deserve what he got, Tiana Snellman said, according to the news.com.au. However, Snellman's younger sister Belinda did not agree with the court's finding that Shane broke into the trash-filled home. He never gained forced entry, she shouted inside the coroner's court. He never broke into that home. He already knew him. So she's saying that he knew the reclusive guy. So I guess there's 2 sides to the story. We'll never know the truth. Did he know him, or was he breaking in? That is the question. So the next case is this one. This is in the UK, in Huddersfield. John Noble's mummified corpse was found in his dilapidated 3-story home in Huddersfield. So there you have a home. I mean, the neighbours are well kept. Wouldn't you start to say, well, where is this guy? Haven't seen him driving his car since the 90s. It's a Ford Sierra. What happened to him? Would you not be sort of curious to find out? I would. If I saw a house next to me where I'd known that the person was living there and suddenly, the mail was piling up, I would go and investigate, I'm afraid. I would thinking that the poor person's lying there, seriously ill after a fall. But people just keep to themselves. A reclusive dad's mummified body was found next to his sofa after a bird was seen trapped inside the house, while a tree was growing through a car outside. So it was a bird. Somebody wanted to rescue the bird. Pauline here. She's worried about the jackdaw's welfare. Well and good. Good on you, animal lovers. Does no one care about humans anymore, though? My goodness. She went to knock on his door. Now, has she ever knocked on his door before? Probably not. But she went to knock on the door because there was a jackdaw in his window. Still getting no answer. A few days later, Mrs. Blake called 101. And then they found his body. So apparently very sad. Speaking after the inquest, Mrs. Blake told the Sun that she had seen the bird inside the house for a couple of days and was worried that it was trapped upstairs. She said Mr. Noble didn't answer when she knocked on his door and called out to him, and that she had rarely seen him in the 9 years she had lived nearby. I never spoke to him and only ever saw him 3 times in all, so she knew that there was someone living there. I mean, it would not be normal, would it? If you're living next door, she's in her 70s, she's obviously retired, you don't see any food deliveries being brought. You know, it's just not normal for someone never to come out of their house. Then you would have to act. It would be on your conscience, surely. I don't understand that, really. I would sometimes hear him coughing, but that's the only sound I ever heard from that house. So he was a recluse. The brother and the son. Piles of mail. Neighbours told police they only saw him collecting shopping. Okay, so I suspected that he was getting his food delivered, and I was right. Okay, one neighbour stated she had raised concerns about Mr. Noble several years ago, but nothing was done as he was deemed to have capacity. What the hell does that mean? Deemed to have capacity. If you don't see anybody, then something's wrong. If they're not getting food delivered anymore, then something is wrong. Wow. I mean, I don't know, the council is, if you're a home owner, they're usually so anal retentive about making sure that your garden is kept in order, that so no vermin start to frequent the area. But in these cases, nothing seems to get done. Mr. Noble's brother Roy, who attended the house after his brother's body was found, told police he'd seen his brother a year ago and he would not answer the door to anyone. Roy said he had to talk to his brother through the letterbox. He said his brother had problems with local youths who had often damaged the windows, which he had then boarded up. It's really sad, so he's been targeted. Once a house starts getting dilapidated, then the teenagers are drawn to it like a magnet. Roy said his brother had split up with his partner 30 years ago and had then become a recluse and isolated himself more. In a statement, Mr. Noble's son Gary said he was estranged from his father. I had not seen him for 29 years. My father sadly pushed people away due to his drinking and also his mental health issues. Very sad. My mother and father split up over 30 years ago, and when they first split, I did try to maintain a relationship with him, but all he ever did was push me away, and that meant having no relationships. That is sad. A lot of these people are hoarders and recluses. Here's another one. Anna Ragin death. Mummified body found in San Francisco hoarder's home infested by rats. Mother left for dead by daughter. This is obviously nothing to do with this story. They just got a picture of a corpse of a religious figure, a saint or something like that. It has nothing to do with this case. So this is obviously a picture inside the home, through the window. A hoard. They're obviously hoarders. Must be a mother and daughter. Hoarder team. So, disturbing find, an elderly woman's mummified body. Police call it the worst case of hoarding they've ever seen. The city was tipped off by a tax accountant who had been contacted by a resident in the house after she received a foreclosure notice. Okay, after she received a foreclosure notice. So, was she a tenant living in the house of this mother and daughter? It always comes down to the money, my dear friends. Always comes down, then they'll come snooping round if bills don't get paid. Dun dun dun, the former owner, yeah. I saw the trash all the way up to the ceiling. Wow, I'm hoping they will clean up the mess quickly so the rodents and black widow spiders so they don't come around the neighborhood. An expert says hoarding is a mental disorder where people who have suffered trauma hold on to things as security. Imagine someone is physically trying to rip your child from you and you say, no, this is my child. That's the feelings and emotions that can be associated with this. It's that strong. So here we see with the documentary of the German lady in the high-rise. She had a traumatic childhood. And God knows how bad it got after her mother died, living with that stepfather. What sort of abuse did he put her through? You know, this has affected her for life afterwards. She couldn't maintain relationships with even her own family. It got that bad. It's actually sad. And the only thing that was normal in her life that she associated with normality was working. The stepfather allowed her to go to work because he wanted the money that she made. He allowed her to go to work. That was the only time where she could enter the world and be herself. And that became ingrained. She went to work. She lived for going to work. After she was forced to retire early, it collapsed. Her whole reality collapsed. Absolutely tragic. And that the neighbor did report that he hadn't seen her in ages and nothing was done is a terrible thing. Terrible thing. The tragedy that haunted the mummified Marina body of German adventurer was found hunched over table on his yacht, next to note to his dead wife and fading photos that provide clues to his path. Clues to his path. Clues to his past. I did read about this story a few years back. I thought I would highlight it again. It's not a classic case of a mummified body being found and the neighbours, basically ignoring the fact that they're missing, because this guy was on a yacht and obviously there is no neighbours. He was floating around the ocean for God knows how long. It's quite interesting though. He was a German adventurer found dead on his yacht off the coast of the Philippines. Manfred Fritz Bajoret, 59. He wrote a 32-word memoriam to his beloved wife Claudia, who had died from cancer aged 53 in 2010. 30 years we've been together on the same path. Then the power of the demons was stronger than the will to live. You're gone. May your soul find its peace. You're Manfred. And there we had Manfred's body in his yacht. Wow, my God, that must have been a lonely death. I wonder, did he die in his sleep, or did he suddenly have a heart attack? Is that a bottle of booze there? Was he drinking, or did he drink something? Did he overdose? Mr. Bajoret's body was found near to the radio telephone as if he was trying one last desperate mayday call to save himself when he died. Maybe he took ill. I just couldn't. It was too late. The 40-foot-long yacht named Seyo had been cruising around the world for the past 20 years. I think in total that's how long he had been sailing. That's a lonely death, isn't it? Very, very tragic. That was him. And there's his wife Claudia. That's obviously her on the yacht. And there's the yacht after they found it. Dry ocean winds, hot temperatures, and the salty air helped to preserve his body. He had broke up with his wife in 2008, who had been on his travels with him, and she died 2 years later of cancer. Very sad. So, not really sure what he died of. No evidence of foul play. He died of natural causes, so he possibly had a heart attack. Heart attack, here we go, perhaps from a heart attack. So I'm going to quickly close it because the next case that I'm highlighting, the final case, is a different format again, so see you in a second. This is a very sad one. Schizophrenic woman mummified in home with "I need help" note lay dead for years. Laura Winham's body lay in her home for almost 4 years, alongside a heartbreaking note on her calendar after no family or social services checked up on her. This is the poor lady here. Discovered dead in her social housing flat in Surrey. Social housing. Why didn't people from the community services come and look for her welfare? Absolutely tragic. The body of a schizophrenic woman was discovered in a mummified, almost skeletal state in her home after lying dead for almost 4 years. Laura Winham had chillingly written "I need help" on her calendar shortly before she passed away, but nobody from social services or her supposed network had checked up on her for years. I do not understand that. I don't understand it. The 38-year-old's gas and electric bills were continuing to be paid through housing benefits after she died, and the annual gas safety check had been registered, the Mirror reports. Her family requested police break into Laura's flat in Woking, Surrey in May 2021 after her brother Roy had peeped through the letterbox and saw what he believed to be a foot. According to the victim's sister, Nikki, should be a comma there, Laura had asked the family to leave her to professionals as she told them she could hear voices in her head and told her to harm them. So she was trying to protect her own family by keeping away from them. We always hoped she would get better with professional help and that one day our contact would resume. We never believed for 1 second we would end up finding her dead on her floor, having laid there for so long without anyone knowing. Well, as far as I'm concerned, in my opinion, the family were also to blame for this. Authorities identified her through dental records. I mean, this is in, a housing estate with lots of people around, lots of people in the same building. How can that happen? She had a string of medical issues, including Golden Hair syndrome, which is a rare congenital condition characterized by the abnormal development of the eye, ear, and spine. She had also been struggling with mental health issues since her early teenage years. Very sad, very sad. Despite being informed her phone was not operating, social workers tried to contact Laura after her disability living allowance was cut off in 2016 when she failed to respond to the Department of Health and Work and Pensions letters. She was later seen by police a year later, who reported her case of self-neglect to social services. What happened? Disgraceful. When authorities could not make contact, they decided to close her case without ever speaking to the vulnerable woman. That is absolutely disgraceful. These people should be put in jail. It is believed Laura died only weeks after she wrote "I need help" on her calendar, and an inquest into her death is due to take place at a later date. Her grieving sister said Laura has been so badly let down. It's just heartbreaking to think of how she lived in her last few years, unable to ask for help, without anyone there for her. It's just tragic. Why did the family not go around? Why didn't they shout through the letterbox? Ask the police to break down the door. I don't understand that. If that was my sister, and I was living nearby, unless they weren't on speaking terms at all. No one, everyone just turned a blind eye. Anyway, I'm going to head off in a minute. The first case that we covered. Let me know your thoughts on these cases. I would love to hear your opinions on these cases that I've highlighted and the ones we covered in the presentation. The first one, though, the tram driver. How's that? Only after 6 months did he get the sack. He was already dead. Must be pretty good working for the public transport in Vienna. They'll just sort of... And he was living in an employee's flat, so he was allowed to just lie there dead for years without them even trying to get the flat back from him. Quite amazing. And again, the neighbours, not sure. Did he go and visit friends and family in Czechoslovakia? They couldn't smell anything because the toilets were getting repaired. It was already stinking. Wow. Very... very strange. I don't know. But as I say before, on a party note, I will say that I think in the future we're going to have more of these cases. We're going to find more of these cases where people become more and more isolated from the community, from their neighbours. Even the place where we live now, when we're living out in the country, but we live in an apartment building, rarely see the neighbours. People in this day and age keep to themselves. They'll be polite to you if you see them. If you see them in the foyer, they'll be polite, but apart from that, there's no contact. In some ways, that's good. You don't want to be bothered with a neighbour that's a pest. But on the other side, if it's an old person, I tend to keep an eye. I tend to check. There's a few old people I know, and I always, ring or check to make sure that they're still doing all right. You don't want to intrude, but from time to time, I think it is a duty to go and do that. All right, my friends, I would love to hear your opinion. What did you think? Did anyone who needed the text, did they struggle with the subtitles? Was it too small? Would love to know how many people still like the full text. I might do a poll to see how many people still want that. If it's an overwhelming majority that they don't want it, then I won't continue. But if it is sort of even half-half, I'll keep the text, because obviously people still want it. I just would like to know. It's been many years since I did a poll on that to find out what your opinion is on that. All right, my dears, I've blabbered long enough. I'm off now. Tutty bye.